came without warning to this community on the outskirts of Sierra Leone's capital. A landslide caused by torrential rain and flash flooding, leaving behind a devastating aftermath. More than 600 people are still missing, and this mass burial was held last week. A hurried operation to deal with the nearly 500 dead recovered so far. More than 20,000 people have been displaced, and there are concerns that corpses buried under the mud may contaminate local water supplies and create an epidemic of waterborne disease. Relief agencies have so far been able to manage the crisis with some international aid, but resources are running out.
They need blankets, they need used clothing or even unused clothing. We need to bring these things here. We need shoes on their feet. We need a lot of things.
And there is increasing frustration and growing criticism that this disaster should never have happened.
I am very disturbed by this national tragedy.
President Ernest Koroma was quick to express his condolences to victims. But critics say this disaster was preventable. A result of the government's lax enforcement of Sierra Leonean laws that block developers from building on protected areas. Illegal housing is common in Freetown. Much of it is built on the hillside surrounding the densely populated capital, causing deforestation and increasing the risk of landslides, putting thousands of people at risk. As the dust settles from this disaster, many wonder whether the Sierra Leonean government will be willing to take the steps necessary to protect its people and prevent a repeat of the tragedy. Basil Rehan, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Freetown is Sierra Leone's presidential spokesman, Abdoulaye Baraitai. And from London is Mike Noyes, the head of humanitarian response at ActionAid, an international organization working to end poverty. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Baraitai, if I can begin with you first, sir. As the spokesman for the president, Ernest Bai Koroma, what is your message to the families who have lost their loved ones and to the survivors?
Thank you very much for this opportunity to further reiterate our profound condolences, which we've already expressed to the people of this country. The president also declared a 7-day mourning that just ended last Monday, and we still continue to mourn. And the president, on a daily basis, continues to visit the affected communities with a view to provide empathy to the people, recognizing that the tragedy that befell this country, we have never witnessed such a tragedy in just one day. A country that has endured a civil war, a country that has gone through the scourge of Ebola, but in just one day, whereby over 400 of our compatriots were buried. It was a very emotional scene as the entire country was in mourning. But again, as a country, we are a very resilient people. We buried our loved ones, but we never buried our hopes. That were exactly the words of President Koroma. And that is why the people of this country continue to support the government in its efforts to make sure we do a safe and dignified location to places that we have identified. The government has allocated 200 acres of land, and construction work for 52 model houses of 2 bedrooms each have just commenced this morning as I am speaking to you.
So, and that's great that you talk about this relocation. You mentioned the word safe, and this is very important. And of course, from the outset, our sincere condolences to all your countrymen. A terrible tragedy, and Sierra Leoneans are a resilient people. But why wasn't this done before? This is an allocated protected area. According to your law, the Western Area Forest Reserve, people are not supposed to live there. They're not supposed to live in this vulnerable place. Why were they living there? Why was there no safety mechanism? Why wasn't there anyone preventing them? Why were there no standards? Why were they there in the first place? In order to face the mudslides, to face the rocks, to face the water, to face everything crashing down on them. Why, sir?
I think that has been the question that many people have been asking. And for us, though, as a government and as a people, we started the demolition of houses in areas that have been declared to be disaster-prone areas. And this didn't just come overnight. Since 2015, when we had the flooding in Freetown, we allocated a place called 6 Mile, which is in the outskirts of the city, and we relocated people there. Eventually, others came back to the areas that were affected, and we did this with the support of our partners at the time, and eventually, it was also in the middle of the fight against the Ebola, so the government was overstretched with resources. But we resumed again just a couple of months ago the reminders to the public that they should not live in these areas. In fact, the Sugarloaf community at region that is most affected, just 2 weeks ago prior to the disaster itself, members of the protected area of agency went there to effect a tree planting program, and they were chased out by the community. For us, though, we are not apportioning blame for now. Years back, also one of our lands officials who went to enforce the law was chased by the community. He was taken to a nearby forest, his eyes gouged, and eventually he was brutally killed. But as I said, for now, we are concentrating on the victims and the affected. But the president has given decisive instructions.
Yeah, certainly.
That the 200 acres allocated.
Again, I'm sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you. This might sound to others from the outside watching, and I have no doubt that this is true, the guy's eyes getting gouged and so on. This might sound as if you're victim blaming, because it's a government responsibility to enforce the laws. People are not supposed to live there. They are, they were, they died. Tens of thousands are displaced. 500 people are dead. And you're saying the people didn't want to move. It sounds as if you're victim blaming. Can you understand how it sounds, how it looks?
We are not blaming anybody, and we have been treated that many a time. For now, the collective effort of every Sierra Leonean, because government has also been indicted, that afterwards we have used the carrot, it is time to use the stick. And we are very mindful of the ILO Convention on the Relocation of People, with particular reference to Article 169, whereby we have to relocate people. First, we get their consent, and secondly, if they are living within disaster-prone areas, how do we make sure we relocate them, taking into consideration their livelihood, etc.? And I just mentioned in my introductory remarks that the government was very much overstretched because of the outbreak of Ebola, because we started the relocation in 2015, which was in the middle of Ebola. But when our economy became devastated as a consequence, this is where we recommenced the process. But as I'm speaking to you now, our focus as a government and as a people is to continue to request the support of the international community to come to our aid. That way we'll be able to have a lasting solution to these disaster-prone areas.
Okay, and that's a good opportunity to bring in Mike Noyes. Mike Noyes, what does Sierra Leone need from the international community to, first of all, find any more survivors if they are? And I know it's getting very, very unlikely right now, but more than 600 are still missing. Is there an opportunity for some outside help to help find and save people? And also beyond that, what needs to be done and who needs to help?
ActionAid has been working with the government of Sierra Leone and other relief agencies since the very onset of this disaster. And like the presidential spokesperson, we'd also like to share our condolences and our sympathy and support for the families of those most affected. I think realistically, a week after the earthquake, there's probably very little chance that any search and rescue is likely to bring back further survivors. What I've seen, what my colleagues on the ground of Sierra Leone have told me, reminds me very much of a situation after an earthquake, say, such as the one in Haiti. So what is needed right now is sort of immediate support for the families of the survivors, the families of those most affected, and indeed the families of those, as the presidential spokesperson has been saying, who will have to be temporarily evacuated or even permanently moved because of further risks such as this. Mm-hmm. In the long term, I think we need to look, as we always do in these circumstances, about how further events can be prevented. You've mentioned a lot of things about safe building codes and the like, and they're all very important. What we do know is in the sense that there's no such thing as a natural disaster. An earthquake or a landslide in an empty area doesn't affect anyone. It's the presence of human beings in those places that creates the disaster, as we've seen here and seen the impact we've seen here. So I think, in Sierra Leone, as the government spokesperson has been saying, we are seeing a situation where the country faces now and in the past multiple challenges, and it does have to do some work on prioritising them. I think it's quite understandable that, Ebola has been a major priority in the past few years, and that we shouldn't underestimate the impact that had on Sierra Leonean society and on Sierra Leonean economy. So even before this landslide, there was a massive call on the international community that did come in solidarity during the crisis of Ebola to continue that solidarity for the reconstruction.
You've mentioned that there's no such thing as a natural disaster because a mudslide or a landslide in an empty area kills nobody. With that in mind, would you use the word neglect when it comes to the government and how prepared they were or ill-prepared they were for this to happen?
I think it's very easy to be wise after the event. It's very easy to say all the things that could be done. I think what is important is to think about how further tragedies of this kind can be prevented in Sierra Leone and elsewhere. I don't think it's particularly helpful to look at a government in a country like Sierra Leone because, frankly, what underlines the causes of these disasters in so many cases is poverty. It's poverty that forces people to live on marginal lands. It's poverty and a lack of livelihoods and such that leads people to cut down trees on hillsides where they can't and such like. It's not simply a problem of policing. It's a problem of development.
Right. Now, certainly, but this also happens in rich countries, as we saw with Katrina and so on. We ask questions afterwards and ask if it can be prevented. Let's move on a little bit now. Mr. Baraitai, what is the government doing to prevent the spread of disease now? Because I'm reading that cholera is a big worry.
Well, it is a major concern for us right now. So what we have done is the Ministry of Health and Sanitation has deployed on the ground in particularly the affected communities. They have done some decontamination, and also UNICEF, one of our development partners, they have trained quick intervention people there, and they have also been deployed so that they can be on the ground advising people the do's and the don'ts to prevent cholera. Just last week we had a scare, but after laboratory tests, it proved to be negative for cholera. So we are stepping up the campaign. Every year, usually, this is the time when we contend with cholera cases. But we are very hopeful that, and very good for now, that we haven't reported any case. And this is where WHO, the government line ministries, as well as UNICEF, they are now on the ground to put in measures in place to make sure we don't get any double jeopardy. That whilst we are dealing with the disaster, we also have cholera on top of it. That will just overstretch us as a nation.
Mr. Baraitai, if I give you the opportunity to address the international community, our international viewership, tell them what you need.
Right now, we are continuing the registration of our people. We have people living in shelters right now that are being constructed because schools are going to be disinfected as they are going to open in the next couple of weeks. We need shelter materials. We need blankets. We need medical supplies, particularly antibiotics. But above all, we needed the support this time, not for just a quick fix of our challenges we have. The government policy is to relocate these people to Mile 6 with a provision of 200 acres of land. The more they can come, already Sierra Leoneans have taken the bull by the horns. They have started constructing 52 two-bedroom houses that they are going to donate free to the government. There is going to be a clinic, a hospital, water facilities. And this is where we continue to appeal for international support, because Sierra Leone had supported other countries in the past. When Haiti, that is far away, in 2009 with their earthquake, Sierra Leone supported very modestly with $100,000. When Mali, a neighboring country in the sub-region, was in crisis, Sierra Leone supported with $1 million. At the time, our economy was doing well. But now our economy was impacted negatively by the Ebola. We are just on the verge of recovery when this disaster struck. And this is where we want to continue to appeal. Even the international community working with their NGOs on the ground, let them synchronize with the government so that collectively we can put this thing behind us. But for now, we don't have any haphazard intervention. I think Sierra Leone deserves better, like any other country that may face a challenge of this nature.
Yeah, strongly put. Mike, you mentioned you saw parallels with what happened in Haiti. In the aftermath of what happened in Haiti with that earthquake, we saw a lot of mismanagement. Sometimes it was just a downright mess when it came to the disaster response and the rebuilding in the aftermath. What sort of lessons can you draw from that experience and hope not to repeat when it comes to Sierra Leone?
I think there's some very clear lessons, certainly around coordination and leadership, and I think it's very pleasing to see how in this particular set of circumstances the government of Sierra Leone and its ministries have built on their experience in responding to Ebola as well as what we've seen elsewhere, and have taken a clear lead in coordination and in organising the disaster response. I think that's a very good step. I think in terms of the work that needs to be done on long-term reconstruction, yes, surely there are lessons to be learnt in terms of where buildings are located, and there's always a challenge with that in that you can locate, as people tried to do in Haiti, say after the earthquake, in very safe areas, but very safe areas that are miles from where their livelihoods are, miles from where their families are, miles from where their opportunities are, and people won't go to them. So understanding not just the technical aspects, but understanding the human and social aspects, and understanding the needs of people, understanding particularly the needs of women, the needs of families, the needs of children, in designing a response, and it not being simply an urban planning fix, I think is quite important. And I am confident that the government of Sierra Leone, working with organisations such as my own organisation, ActionAid, has learnt much and is ready for this sort of challenge.
Gentlemen, I'm glad we've had this conversation. I've got to move on, but terrible time for the people of Sierra Leone. We wish them maximum power, maximum strength. Thank you very much for joining us, Abdoulaye Baratai and Mike Noyes. Bye-bye.